What's up, YouTube? In this video I want to talk about the JB4 and installing it on the Elantra GTs, or really any of the Kias or Hyundais. The process is essentially the same. Now this isn't really meant to be an installation tutorial because, for one, this thing's extremely easy to install, and two, the instructions that are provided by Burger Motorsports, they're more than adequate. But I wanted to kind of give a visual reference to sort of see what it looks like when it's being installed on this particular vehicle or similar vehicle. But before we look at what that's going to look like under the hood, just want to give a quick little primer on exactly what the JB4 is and why you may or may not want to install it on your vehicle. So first thing to understand is that this product right here is essentially going to do the same thing that a Lap 3 or an AFE Scorcher, race chip, essentially anything that's considered a chip tune is, it's not really a tune. You're not remapping your ECU. You're actually not even touching the ECU. And as far as your car is concerned, it doesn't really know that anything is changing. Essentially what these are doing is they're plugging into a few key sensors and essentially tricking the car into making more boost. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but the long and short of it, that's exactly what's happening. So that's where you're going to get your power. I will say that something like this is hands down the cheapest and easiest way to get power out of your car. There's no other modification that you're going to be able to spend money on and put on this car that's going to give you the power that this is. Now, obviously, you could get more power, not a whole lot more, but better power from an actual flash tune on your ECU, as well as many other benefits. But one of the benefits of something like this is it's really easy to install. It's easy to remove if you no longer want to have this on the car. And for the people that are worried about their warranties, obviously you do a flash tune on your ECU, take it into the dealership or wherever, they get into the ECU, they're going to see that it's been remapped. So chances are that's going to cause you some issues when it comes to warranty stuff. So most people choose these for the reason that they're either not comfortable flashing their ECU or they just want to preserve the factory warranty. So, and it definitely works. You know, you're going to see some different numbers. I think on this car, from the dyno graphs I've seen, you're typically going to see around maybe 210 to 220 wheel horsepower, and then probably 250 plus wheel torque. You can certainly feel it. One thing I will say that, and then spoiler alert, I actually removed this from my car. I ran it for about 6 months, and it was fine. But one of the things that I noticed, there's a lot of problems with the factory tune on this car. The good tuners will be happy to point that out for you. And the good tuners can sort of remove those issues from the factory tune when they're giving you a new map to basically just make the car feel a lot smoother. I felt like this giving you more boost but not necessarily smoothing out some of those areas in the factory tune kind of accentuated those issues. So again, not the end of the world, but ultimately the reason I removed this is as soon as I can get an intercooler, I'm ready for just a flash tune to sort of reap some of those additional benefits. But yep, that's basically the gist of what you're doing here. You know, I would say it's worth the money, any of them. Like I said, I don't think there's a drastic difference between any of these chip tunes. I chose the JB4 because it does give you some other parameters to sort of mess around with, and I also felt like there's a really good community surrounding this between both the Facebook page and the forums. Any questions or problems you have, it's pretty easy to get some feedback and get some answers on that stuff. So that's why I went this route. But as far as just making power on a certain budget, I think you're going to get very similar, if not the same results from any of the others that I mentioned at the beginning there. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pop the hood here and just give you a quick little glance at what it looks like to do these connections here. Okay, so as I was editing the video, I realized there were some things that I failed to mention when I was talking about how quote-unquote cheap and easy the JB4 is to install and get results from. So it's not as simple as just buying the JB4, installing it, and you're good to go. A couple other things that you have to keep in mind, and these are all things that will be spelled out when you're ordering the product. And this really goes for any chip tune, and these are things you're probably going to do along your journey of modifying the vehicle anyway, but you will need to upgrade your spark plugs. Berger does say that you can re-gap the factory plugs. I'm not really sure how well that works and what the longevity from that's going to be. Most people end up just buying new plugs. Also, it's highly recommended that you already have an oil catch can installed, and you are going to have to make sure you're running premium fuel. So for, I think most people, that's 91 octane. I'm fortunate to live in an area where 93 is pretty much the normal for premium. But yeah, when you're running this on map 1 or 2, you're going to want to have, 91 or higher octane fuel. So, that's just something to consider when you're sort of factoring in the cost of doing something like this. The other thing is that even though the JB4 does work on all of the Hyundais and Kias, at least this one in particular, that's programmed for it, the majority of Berger's development is done for the Kia Stinger. So there may be some parameters you have to tweak to sort of make it make more sense for your vehicle. One thing, for instance, that I did notice on mine, the Stingers have a lot more power, and they do have traction issues, especially in first gear. So the JB4 sort of takes that into account, and it really kind of made my car feel sluggish in first gear compared to the factory tune. And again, you can go in and you do have the freedom to adjust some of those parameters yourself, and if you do some research on the forums, it's not too difficult to figure out, but just something I felt like it was worth mentioning. Now, as far as your main connections go, this is really simple. So the ones with the brown wires, that's what you're going to connect into your map sensor, which is this guy right here. So you're going to unplug this, plug that in, good to go. And then the multicolor one, that's going to go down on your T-map, which, let me get a flashlight again. And that's that guy right there. Both are very easy to get to, pretty simple to unplug and plug back in. So as far as the main connections go, that doesn't really get much easier. So let's talk about this fuel wire connection that there's a lot of debate. Berger recommends on these engines that you don't necessarily need to connect the fuel wire. Says you get very little benefit from it. My thought process was that it's already there, so why not do it? There is some benefit, I believe, more in the top end, but probably negligible enough to where if you don't feel like messing with it, I don't think you're going to miss out on too much. But this is what, if you buy the harness from them, very good quality harness, so I highly recommend doing it this way if you are going to connect the fuel wire. This is what it looks like with the posi tap connected on here. I've obviously just taken this off, so it's actually got a little bit of a bend to it the way I had it connected. But When I was first installing this was probably the most difficult part. Everything else is extremely easy, and what makes this hard is just where you have to get to. I'm going to do my best to try to show you here. Essentially what you're doing is you're intercepting the signal coming off of the main O2 sensor, which is way back here. So I'll try to get some light on this because it's pretty difficult. Okay, so I just grabbed a flashlight, and I don't know how well you can see this. Now see how I've got this harness disconnected down here from the little mounting bracket? You can see the gray. It's on this part of the engine here. So you're way back. Now I've got my breather hose disconnected from my intake to get my hand down in there. This is probably way easier if you just take your whole intake tube off. But there's two connectors, one right above the other. The one you need to get to is below the top one. So what I found is if you can get that clip off of that metal bracket, you can kind of move that out of the way, and then you can get your hand down in there and disconnect that connection there. But that's where it's at. Just prepare yourself. It's a huge pain to get your hands in there. Like I said, I think if you just go through the trouble of removing your intake tube, I can't speak to how much more difficult it would be if you're still on the factory intake, because I did this after the Canon one was already installed. But even with this tube here, it was a little bit of a pain. But if you decide to do it, that's where it's at. Obviously, you can just run the wire kind of around the backside here down to it. No big deal. So there's going to be two fuel wires on here because these also work with any of the other Hyundais or Kias. So given that most of the guys that run them have stingers, you've got two of these harnesses that you have to worry about. But on your 4 cylinders, it's just the one. So this is what it looks like when everything is connected, cable managed, all that good stuff. Got a trusty light here to try to help you guys see everything. But anyway, connection here on the map sensor. I've got basically the module mounted to the top of the fuse box, which is where most people do it. I did not double side tape it for a couple reasons. One, it's actually, the top of this cover is curved, so you can't really get a good solid contact if you're just using mounting tape. I actually built little standoffs because there's holes that go through the 4 corners of the module here, and I'll try to show you that a little bit more up close here. But to get some nice, I don't know, clean looking runs as far as the all the wiring goes, just use zip ties to try to tidy things up. Down here's a little bit of a bird's nest because I've got multiple different connectors, adapter for the blow off valve, and then the JB4 connector on the T-map there, and then ran this line along whatever this factory vacuum line goes to the manifold for. I don't really know, but that was a good spot to run and zip tie off to. The hard one to see is back here where the fuel wire connects to. I don't know if I'm going to be able to show you that. It's down in there. You can kind of see the red on the connection there. But yeah, honestly, just very straightforward, about as easy as it can get. You're literally just connecting a few things, the fuel wire being the optional one. I just took a little piece of mounting tape and put it on the little Bluetooth receiver here and connected it to the cowl. I don't know, in my mind it seemed like the closer to the cabin of the car I could get, I might get a better Bluetooth signal, but that probably doesn't matter. I think most people just kind of put it wherever. I tucked excess cables down into between the battery and the fuse box. And then as far as running the cable into the cabin to connect into the OBD2 port, I'll show you that one here in a little bit. That's the hardest part. I think there's only one spot that you can get that through the firewall. I did what a lot of people do, which doesn't necessarily look good, but I ran it through the door jamb because I knew I wasn't going to be keeping this on here long term. So I didn't want to go through the trouble of fishing it through the firewall because it's a real pain. I guess if you were going to leave this in long term, it would make sense. But for my purposes, I just avoided that. So yeah, pretty simple. I ran everything underneath the intake to kind of try to hide some of it. Again, I wanted to keep as clean of an appearance as possible, but you're obviously adding more cables and more connectors and all that, so you're going to have to spend a little bit of time managing with the zip ties, but not too difficult. All right, so as far as this thing goes, this is what connects into your OBD2 port. This is by no means the cleanest way to do this, but it certainly is the easiest if you don't want to mess with getting through the firewall. But I just ran it underneath the cowl right here. Comes out, fished it through the fender, then comes out on the other side, and I just taped it with some automotive masking tape. Comes down, fished it through here. Obviously goes behind there. You just pull this panel off. That's where you'll find your OBD2 access port. Plug her in and you're good to go. So that's the easy way. I'm not even going to get into what it involves as far as getting through the firewall. You could just, I don't know, look on some different forums or do a search, but I mean, it's way back in there behind where you probably really have to pull the battery, the ECU and all that to get access to that area. And then you got to poke a hole through your factory grommet there. And again, like I said, I just didn't really feel like messing with it. So like a lot of people, I just did it the easy way, and it is what it is. Now, as far as how I mounted this to the top of the fuse box cover, and I also ordered a replacement OEM cover since I was drilling holes in this one, so that I had a way to replace it when I was finished. But essentially I just bought, you can see that it's got a curvature to the top, and with this being so long, I guess you could build up mounting tape. You don't necessarily have to do this, but I felt like this was just made me feel more comfortable with how stable it was, and I think it looks a little bit nicer. But it's really just bolts and washers. I sort of created these standoffs just simply using bolts and washers, and then some nuts at the top. I think they're nylon locking nuts. I apologize, I don't remember the lengths and everything that I used, but I don't think this is a very difficult thing to figure out, and you're only spending a few dollars in parts. So obviously takes a little bit of time to sort of get everything measured out, make sure you're drilling your holes in the right spot, but yeah, pretty straightforward. It's obviously not going anywhere. It's on there pretty good. So yeah, if you want to spend a little bit of extra time, you can do something similar to this and essentially get the same results. Okay, so I wanted to give some final thoughts and some of the stuff I touched on in the intro. As far as my feedback after using the JB4 for 6 months, I would say that is definitely worth the money, especially because of how easy it is to install. Almost anyone can do it. I'm sure there's going to be some people out there that aren't comfortable sort of messing with things like this, but it really doesn't get much easier as far as, plugging something in and getting some power out of the car. I ran this car at the track, at the drag strip, before and after the JB4. Now, unfortunately, after putting the JB4 on, temperatures went up quite a bit, so I did not have very favorable conditions. I was able to run a 15 flat in the quarter mile on the stock tune. That was in the spring. Temperatures were really nice. And then I shaved off about a half second with the JB4. I would say that's pretty significant for the amount of money, especially considering you're spending, if you buy new with the Bluetooth adapter, you're spending around a little over $600. A lot of times you can pick these things up used for right around $500. So bang for the buck. It doesn't really get much better. And the fact that you can put it on and take it off so easily is also a plus to that as well. But that being said, I'm looking forward to seeing what I can do with an actual flash tune on the vehicle. I'm expecting, just better results, a much smoother power delivery, especially given the dyno graphs I've seen. But for anyone considering it, I would definitely recommend it. It's just cheap and easy, and it's good results.